So welcome back to the channel, everyone. Today we have a Shogun book talk, and it's the original story by James Clavell. And me and Rick are going to talk about a number of themes, what it means to be civilized, identity and loyalty, religion, and what can you say and what can you do according to your religion, and individualism versus collectivism. I think this book, and we think this book, is very engaging and inspiring for a lot of discussions that are relevant to the society today and also the fantasy genre and historical fiction genre. So it will be very interesting. And today I have with me Rick, who is a friend, and you can tell more about yourself as well.
Sure. Yeah. So I'm in Ontario, Canada. My day job, for those who maybe haven't heard me give this before on other talks I've done with Shrikant, I'm a conservation biologist by day, but my hobbies greatly overlap with Shrikant's, which is what led me to this channel. So I'm an avid fantasy reader and gamer. A lot of the games and books that he's talked about, I've read or am reading or I've played for the games. And I actually ended up connecting with Shrikant through the comments on his channel, which then led to us chatting and becoming friends, and then him very kindly inviting me to be on his channel. So I encourage anyone who's listening, definitely reach out to him through the comments. He's very accessible that way. And thank you for having me.
Yeah, happy to have you here. We have been buddy reading the Shogun book, and it has been for a few months now. We're 50% almost into it, so this will be spoiler up to that point. So let's see how big spoilers it can become, but there will be some spoilers. So if you don't want to know, you don't want to know nothing, so don't listen so much more. We're going to briefly talk about what the book's plot, of course. So now you are warned. Shall we just jump right into this? Should we say something about the book plot? Maybe that's good still.
Yeah. At this point, like Shrikant said, we're up to chapter 32 for those who are just kind of curious exactly where we are. I guess big picture plot, of course, it's a very complicated plot and story, but you have an Englishman, a pilot. So this is taking place in kind of medieval Japan. And you have this English pilot explorer who is navigating a ship that happens upon Japan. They kind of got lost in a storm, but were making their way to Asia from the Magellan Strait. And they arrive in Japan, and he is immediately kind of swept up in kind of the local politics, which then expands to the countrywide politics, to then even like geopolitical, like the whole world politics, because the Portuguese and Spanish are already in Japan, and they're already converting Japanese to Christians and establishing trade and kind of trying to influence Japanese society. And then the big leader of Japan had just recently died, and now there's a lot of infighting, and so Blackthorne, the main character, kind of gets swept up in that and is kind of becoming a pawn in the different factions that are going on, and we're just kind of along for the journey to see what happens. I guess just to paint some broad strokes there. Anything you wanted to add?
No, I think it was a good summary. I think we're gonna go into that further, but the many cultures, you could say, that are clashing and meeting and so on is interesting, because we have the Europeans who are, of course, the British here, and medieval Europe at that time had a lot of let's say complicated relationships between the different monarchies, and who was friends with whom, who was allied with whom, and that is central for the book. And we also have the Portuguese, so we have the perspective of Catholics and Protestants, and then we have the aspect of Japanese feudalism and the kami faith, and also Japanese becoming Christianized more and more during this era. So it's quite interesting from that perspective. But I also think that in addition to what you said, we are as much strangers as Blackthorne in this, because it's interesting to follow Blackthorne. He's a funny guy, frustrated guy, and also curious on what he meets. And it's with the stranger's eyes we meet Japan. And I would add that the book has, in some circles, become very criticized. It's praised in many circles, but it's also criticized. So I checked up some of the critique earlier, and it has to do with the post-colonial interpretation and description of the Japanese, and I've seen different takes on that, but just as you, so you know, who are listening are aware that we are aware about that too, but we have tried to approach this with our fresh eyes and sometimes our eyes with less knowledge about, for example, Japanese society and the medieval era of Japan and also Europe too. So if you are more of an expert on this than we are happy you give comments and ask questions and give your thoughts here in the comments below. So.
Yeah, and one of the things that I'll add too is because I don't want to, and I think Shrikan's done the same thing, spoil anything about the book. I haven't looked anything up about like the historical accuracy of the characters or the events and those sorts of things, because I want to finish the book first and then look up that kind of stuff to avoid any potential spoilers.
Yeah. Yeah, should we jump right into the themes?
Sure. Yeah, so we picked 4 different themes based on kind of what's standing out to us as we read this book together. And one of the big themes that really has stood out to me while reading this book is, what does it mean to be civilized? And I'm not using the word from like an anthropology way in terms of like, do you have writing and laws and that sort of thing? But throughout the book, you get perspectives from lots of different characters. It's not just a single perspective through Blackthorne. So you get perspectives through some of the Japanese characters, through some of the Portuguese characters, and through Blackthorne. And there's a lot of ideas around, every character thinks their society, their culture is civilized, and the other culture or cultures are barbarians. And they focus on really different things for what makes them think they're civilized versus the others. So, for instance, Blackthorne will look at how the Japanese people will so readily commit seppuku, ritual suicide, or kill people who break the law as barbaric because they're disregarding, or their views of life are so different than his, and both as a European and as a Christian. Whereas the Japanese look at the Portuguese and the English, and they think they're super barbaric because they have terrible manners. They don't bathe or clean themselves properly. They eat like animal meats, and they don't show proper respect and all these different things. And so there's a lot of that kind of back and forth in this, with they're each thinking like, oh my god, that guy's such a barbarian. And I just find that super fascinating, and thinking about like, especially from a modern lens where Western society now does bathe regularly and do a lot of the things that the Japanese were doing then, and maybe the Europeans weren't. And so it's just very interesting to think about that question and the dichotomy that's presented in this book. I don't know, what do you think?
Yeah, it's a great theme in the book, and it's maybe some of you have seen the I think it's Disney, maybe it's not. It's on Disney Channel here in Sweden, so I'm not sure if it's Disney sponsored the Shogun. I don't think it is, but the Shogun TV series, and there we usually get we don't hear what they are thinking, the Japanese or the Portuguese or the British, for example, but in the book we get into their heads. So by doing that, many characters here, Blackthorne, of course, we have a guy called Rodrigues, we have Toranaga, for example, Mariko-sama, we're going to talk a bit about them later as well, a few characters, and Yabu-sama is a tricky guy.
Yeah.
And yeah, the Yabu guy. He's but you get into their heads, so you can really hear their thoughts that they are accusing each other of being barbarian, and I think that is a very, I mean, interesting way, because we only not just get one perspective, who's being the uncivilized. We get many perspectives in the book, so I think that's fascinating to listen to, and everyone thinks that they are the most civilized.
Yes. Yeah. And it one of the things that I think is just so interesting about it is the different aspects of culture that each is characterizing as what it means to be civilized or what it means to be a barbarian. Like for the Japanese, it's cleanliness. They talk about that a lot. They talk about like honor and kind of respect and yeah, similar kind of ideas to that. Whereas the Europeans, there's a lot of concepts, or like a lot of the things that they find barbaric are the violence or the quick, decisions to end life, or kind of aspects like that. And then thinking about, and then there's also all these like smaller things where the Japanese mostly didn't have chairs. They would kneel on mats or sit on mats, and Blackthorne is and others are just like, I just want to sit in a chair. Or the Europeans don't like sake. They would prefer to have beer, and they don't like the Japanese food, which is at the time was more fish-based, fish and vegetable, because of some of the restrictions, as I understand it from the book, from Buddhism about not eating meat. And they just kind of crave the foods that they're used to in Europe. And there was even a scene too early on when Rodrigues gets injured, and the Japanese doctor is treating him in ways that, as we understand now, are actually the better ways. But Europeans preferred to do things like bleeding people. And there was a scene where Blackthorne was saying he wanted to keep the windows closed on the cabin where Rodrigues was being kept, because he knew that would keep out the miasma, or the bad air, when in reality, no, you want that airflow to keep things from getting stale. So like that was super interesting to kind of think about how these two different cultures even approached medicine, and thinking about it from our kind of modern perspective.
Yeah, and I also think you have the perspective of Blackthorne is by Mariko-sama, who is a translator in the book, by the way, Japanese. She accuses him from time to time being impatient. The Japanese culture is still described as relatively hierarchical compared to Europe, for example, the West. But in this book, it's highlighted a lot that, and Blackthorne is quite impatient, frustrated, and rude. I think we can agree. I don't know, but maybe we can agree on that. But he is contrasted to the Japanese patience, culture of patience.
Yeah, there are many, many times where Mariko is saying, please be patient to him. Sometimes he listens, sometimes he doesn't. Whenever he doesn't, it usually goes poorly. Yeah. But maybe one day he'll learn that lesson.
And the book is written, I think, in the 70s.
I believe so, yeah. 1975, I think, is when it was published.
Yeah. And I'm thinking about, the perception of Japan today, at least here in Scandinavia, which I can comment upon. It's very positive. There are a lot of good food and cleanliness and art style and movies and all kind of things. As Japanese culture is quite popular, I would say. So I
Mhm.
think that's interesting too. Is in the 70s, I don't know, but I suppose Japan was less known. I know it has been used in other genres, but we don't need to go into these genres here. But because it
Mhm.
was exotic in a maybe another way than it is now.
Right. Yeah, it's an interesting point because I do feel like, in the past few decades, Japanese, like aspects of Japanese culture have become quite popular in the West in general. You think of like manga or anime or, Studio Ghibli films, or sushi and Japanese food,
Mm,
um, green tea, which I know is not just a Japanese thing, but
mm,
there's a lot of, I feel like there's a lot of parts of Japanese culture that have become very popular in the West. But yeah, I don't know what that was like in the 70s. I don't imagine it was as pronounced.
mm,
I think in part just because of, you know, differences between now and then in terms of communication, not having the internet, things like that. It
mm,
was, not as easy to get access to that sort of material so easily.
mm. If someone if you're watching and you know how it was in the 70s, how people perceived Japan 70s or the 80s even, maybe beginning of
Mhm.
90s even, because I think that's when it started to change here.
Yeah.
Also the fact that with meditation and
Yep.
Zen Buddhism and all these
Mhm.
kind of things are more common. I mean, especially in the US and maybe I think Canada too with Zen Buddhism.
Mhm.
It's maybe not that big, but it's not, it's not unknown. And Zen is a trendy word nowadays.
Yeah.
To be Zen. So there is a lot of things that had changed and that might change our perspective when we read Shogun. So I think civilization, who's the civilized, is a great topic. I don't know, maybe it was more, it still can be. So I think it can be a hot topic even for me. But to say that it's not so post-colonial anymore, but maybe it was even more post-colonial in the 80s and 90s. I don't know.
Right.
Maybe it's changed. I am not sure. So.
Because I mean, like, if I'm giving kind of my opinion about it, you know, while there are more violent depictions of certain aspects of culture in this book for the Japanese, they seem way more kind of civilized than the Europeans at the time in terms of like, their cleanliness, their manners, their just I don't know, respect and the way that they interact with each other. Like a lot of these, I mean, I think, and we'll get into this with one of the other themes, but a lot of these Europeans are also the people who are not super integrated into their own societies because they're the explorers, the ones that are leaving and going elsewhere. But yeah, I mean, like the cleanliness one is one that just comes up all the time, which is just so interesting. Like at one point, Mariko and some of the other Japanese leaders are on one of the Portuguese ships, and they're just disgusted. They're like, I can't breathe. It smells so bad here, um, and I get it. Like when you look at least for me, North American kind of cleanliness culture, it's so different than as I understand it was in Europe at the time, where people clean themselves more regularly. We use deodorant or
Mm,
cologne or perfume or whatever. Um, I can't imagine how bad a ship like that would have smelled with a bunch of people that maybe bathe when they jump in the water. Like,
yeah.
because there was even a part in the book where Blackthorne was talking about when he's first got to Japan and they were trying to force him to bathe. He was like, "Hell
Mm,
no, I don't want to bathe. That's how you get sick."
mm,
Because I guess how that kind of was perceived in Europe is that was a more dangerous activity. I don't know kind of the like how realistic that was, but he associated baths as a bad thing. So it's just so interesting, that kind of dichotomy there.
yeah, and the prejudice and the um, yeah, being uncivilized label is a bit reversed if we think about it today. I don't mean that's true then, but that the West can have, in broad terms, the idea that the other is unclean, for example. So here it's
Yeah.
reversed, and that is of course different in other countries. As some of you who follow the channel know, I travel a lot in my country of birth, in India, and of course the perception is different in India towards Western people, how they are, and so on. So the prejudices are always reversed, and I think the book highlights that a lot. I think maybe to this is great bridge to identity and loyalty, at least identity, because on the one hand we have the Japanese who are there, the rulers like Toranaga and Yabu, for example. And then we have the Europeans depicted by Blackthorne, more people, and Rodrigues, for example. We might talk about the characters just for a bit, maybe,
Sure.
so people can know who we are talking about. But the interesting thing is that the identity, I think for Blackthorne, from my perspective, and Mariko-sama, I don't think, it changes a bit in the book still, because when Blackthorne comes to Japan, he's always British and so on, but he takes on Japanese customs and he learns or wants to learn. It's a bit changes in the book if he doesn't want to learn Japanese, but he takes on Japanese customs and culture. And Mariko-sama is the translator. She is Christian, but loyal, of course, to Toranaga, which is the leader for that group. And from time to time in the book, especially where we are now, she questions Blackthorne, and she is questioned too if it's according to their culture to do different things. So in the case with Mariko-sama, she has to follow what Toranaga says, but it can go against Christianity. So is she loyal to feudal Japan, or is she loyal to Christianity, for example? At the same time, the Christians can be accused for killing because, as we know in the Bible, Christians shouldn't kill. At least that's an interpretation. Maybe it's not correct, but they throw these accusations towards each other, and then I think it becomes an interesting book and an interesting story about identity and also migration and who we are. So what's your take on that, Rick?
Yeah, I think when you think about the ideas or the themes of identity and loyalty, there's kind of two scenarios that stand out the most to me in the books. And the first is Mariko. Because there's a lot of Japanese Christians at this point who have been converted, but she's the one who we spend in her head the most so far, because she serves Toranaga, who is not Christian and has no intention of ever converting, and doesn't seem to actually like the Christians as their religion, but he likes their trade. But so she's Christian, but she very much is Japanese and a samurai first. And that actually has come up a few times in the book. Like at one point, Toranaga actually says, "Put your God away, like stop being Christian." And she manages to convince him that I don't need to do that because I'm Japanese and a samurai and loyal to you first, and then a Christian second. And she does act that way. And she, like, there's a lot of weird or interesting kind of ways in which you get her thoughts where she will take kind of what it means to be Japanese and samurai and mold what it means to be a Christian into that, so that they do work together. Whereas if you took them at face value, they might not, because like you said, Shrikant, one of the 10 commandments is you shall not kill, but killing and suicide and that sort of thing are very much a part of Japanese culture as it's presented in this book. But she blends that. Like she manages to make that work in her mind, whereas the Jesuits would condemn all of that killing, at least outwardly. But yeah, like that's kind of a really interesting kind of clashing of identity for her that she manages to bridge together smoothly, that I find super fascinating.
I think she is in that respect very modern. If we think about, I mean, migration has been, people have also always migrated. So, but there is this idea that in old times, people did not migrate. Everyone lived within their borders and had one identity, and it's an interesting discussion. So, but it's, you can discuss that in relation to Shogun, which is, it makes it even more exciting, I think. And Mariko Sama has this transnational perspective in a way, because she blends Japanese, the Christian culture, and then she gets influences, of course, from Blackthorne, from the British, and also from the Portuguese. So I think I think humans have always been modern when it comes to identity, because we have always migrated and we have always changed, interchanged ideas, mixed ideas between cultures. But it's not what you expect from this book, especially not when I read the initial thoughts about the book, because then you had the idea it's also very essentialistic, one cultured. It's not like that, and I think Mariko Sama represents that perspective very well. So
Yeah, and it also just, it kind of highlights the idea too that even a single religion, like in this case it's Catholicism, because the Portuguese and the Spanish brought Catholicism. The way Catholicism is adapted or embedded into a given culture can vary differently. Like Spanish Catholicism versus Japanese Catholicism here are quite different in kind of how they're implemented and thought about. Because it also seems like while Mariko believes in God, the Catholic God, she also believes that the emperor is descended from the gods, that Japan is the land of the gods, that the kami still exists. So, she's kind of blended those two aspects of the religion as well, which of course is not something you would probably see at that time in Spain or Portugal. So I find that really interesting. Yeah, any other thoughts on Mariko?
yeah, she doesn't know that there are Protestants and
Right.
Catholics, for example. So that's interesting, and that's maybe a parallel would be that Europeans and Westerners, people from North America and Europe then nowadays maybe don't know the layeredness of Buddhism, for example, maybe.
Right.
But there might be violent people and internal conflicts and so on, but for her probably Christianity is extremely peaceful, I suppose. So maybe it serves a similar purpose that other faiths can do for Western people today as well. So I think that's interesting. With identity, I have the addition that it's not only this identity on ethnicity, so to speak, or cultural identity. We also have I don't know if it's class identity or class identity. It's the Rodrigues.
Yes.
And you brought that up when we prepared this. And Blackthorne, who has the common class marker, I would say, and they share loyalty at least in that. Maybe you can elaborate a little bit on that.
Yeah, so that is a really interesting, that's the second kind of really interesting way I see identity playing out in this story is, so you've got the Catholics, the Portuguese and Spanish versus the Protestants, the British, the Dutch, and in Europe they're at war. And there's lots of animosity between the groups, both on a religious level, but also on a national level. Um, and you see that playing out in Shogun with like the Jesuit priests and Blackthorne showing up and them instantly kind of being aggressive towards each other. But you have this really interesting breakdown of that between Rodrigues, who is Portuguese, and Blackthorne, who's British, of course, because they're both pilots. They have the same job. And it seems like, in general, it's a very kind of unique job and a well regarded job, but they seem to take that identity above their religious and their national identities. And so they're willing to help each other out, even if it goes against the directives of their leaders or their religion. And that's kind of really cool that they're basically like their shared identity is transcending these other things that are super antagonistic.
Yeah, it's amazing that he has put in so many themes. This is only nowadays, it's only at least 1,000 pages. So it's a big book, so no doubt about that. But when we read books today, so as we all know, it's a big series with 5 books, 6 books, and so on. This is extremely, I think, well written and dense in detail, because there's a lot of things we won't talk about today. For example, the political scheming, which is quite complicated. At least to me, I haven't unlocked everything.
Oh no, definitely not.
What happens there? But shall we say something more about identity, or go further to the next topic?
I mean, I think it kind of it flows well into the next topic of individualism versus collectivism, which is one of the ones that you thought about, which is really interesting. Do you want to?
Yeah, that is the fact that that might be a bit of a maybe critique, but maybe an unfair critique, because we always write, every author write from his or her cultural understanding and where the time you live in, because the my perception, maybe it's my prejudice, but of the medieval Europe is that it was not so progressive, focus on equality and women's rights and all these kind of things. But when you read Shogun, I get the impression that the Europeans are depicted more modern, even though there are exceptions to that you mentioned, Rick, with cleanliness and all these kind of things, but more modern than they actually were. So in that sense, if it's something that is very stereotypical described to maybe from a Western point of view, maybe the Japanese, negative for the Japanese, it's maybe the hierarchical culture, because they are so with the seppuku and the loyalty to the leader and the leader's power over those who are inferior. It sounds like Blackthorne is a true individualist. I doubt, but that's the impression. He might be. What's your take on that?
Yeah, I think that's really interesting, and I very much see where that's coming from, because of how we are spending time with these different characters. Even the Portuguese, a lot of them will seem like they are more able to just do whatever they want and not have kind of these social hierarchies. But to me, I wonder if it's largely driven by kind of the setting and the scenario, because with the Japanese, they are at home within their social structures. And so, of course, then they will be operating within those social structures. Whereas the Europeans here are explorers. They are far from home. They're not within their normal social hierarchies. They don't have the same like authority figures present and potentially enforcing different things upon them, especially with Blackthorne. He's the only British person there. So in terms of the British monarchy, there's no he alone represents that monarchy. So there's no pressure on him to act a certain way outside of what he thinks is best. So I think like that might be driving some of that feeling, is just the fact that we're not in Europe.
Hmm.
And maybe these characters would act totally differently if we were in Europe. I think the other thing that's potentially going on here too is when you think about the types of people who tend to be the explorers or the pirates or whatever, they tend to, not always, but they tend to have certain traits or personality types that maybe are a bit more rebellious or self-serving or individualistic. So it could also just be these people are that way or depicted that way because that's likely what they were like as explorers and sailors and that sort of thing. So I think both of those things might be why it might feel that way. But it could also just be the author's bias as well. I'm not sure.
Yeah, I think you have a good point in the personality traits of those being explorers, because I suppose they must have been outside the social norm, so to speak. Most people were staying in the village or city or country where they were born, of course, in medieval Europe, probably the city or the county even. So if you um, went out for adventure like that, you had to be very maybe outcast, maybe odd. I don't mean that, but as you said,
Yeah.
have a rebellious personality and wanting something more. And as we understand from the book, they are. I mean, it's they have to take these jobs as pilot because of getting income and to feed their family. But it can be very well paid.
Mhm.
From the British Crown, which is also different from how the Japanese or the Japanese are described, that there is not that kind of monetary exchange. Still, Europe at that time wasn't it's not market economy like we have today, so it was more mercantilism and things like that, I suppose.
Mhm.
So still, it was not like it is today, but still. So I think your point is good, and I think that I don't know. I know too little about James Clavell. That would be interesting to know more about
Right.
how he was. Maybe he's made interviews and things like that. I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's one of those things where I am curious once I finish the book to dive more into the potential critiques on the book and see, what he may or may not have gotten right and wrong based on other people's opinions. Because that could also shed some light onto this topic as well. Like
Mm.
how accurately did he potentially depict Japanese and European cultures, or like how explorers would have acted and that sort of thing.
Yeah, I read some very divisive comments about that. It was really like life is on social media today, that were either for or against. So some people think he was, very enlightening in his way of writing, with portraying the different sides equally prejudiced, and others think he got everything wrong, historical facts and exaggerated characters for the drama. This is historical fiction. That's important to highlight, I think.
Yeah.
So it's not accurate, but it's very. I think still it can be very rewarding from a reader's point of view, intellectually, and it's also quite fun. I think the book is quite entertaining.
Yeah, totally. It's been so much fun to read. It's such a gripping story that like it's hard to put down, because it just goes from like conflict to conflict to conflict, and you're just always like, oh god, what's going to happen next, or what is this character going to do. So regardless of its accuracy, it's a really really good story, and I still think the themes that are explored in it, like what does it mean to be civilized, or identity and loyalty, even if all the facts are wrong, I think those are still well explored in this story. So I think from a a bias or a historical accuracy perspective, I don't think it would necessarily take away from the story itself.
Mm.
You can just think of it as an alternative reality of this world where this is what Japan could have been like in a different reality or universe or something.
Mm. Yeah, everything is imagination, more or less, maybe as well.
Exactly.
So,
Yeah.
should we bridge over to characters, maybe, because it's a natural bridge too?
Sure.
When we talk about entertaining, maybe. So,
Yeah. Yeah.
what characters and what moments have been your favorite so far?
Yeah. I was thinking about this earlier today, and I was thinking, do I have a favorite or favorite like multiple favorite characters? And there are definitely characters I like and that I'm rooting for, and it's very easy for me to decide on some of the characters I don't like. Um, but I would say like my two potential favorites or three favorites right now are Mariko, because I think she's very interesting. Toranaga, he is brilliant, and I'm just very curious to unravel the multiple layers of schemes and plans that he's put in place. And then Rodrigues, although I'm a little afraid that Rodrigues is now done because I think they're sailing, the Portuguese ship is leaving, and I don't know if we'll see him again. But he's a really interesting character for me because when you first meet him, I kind of got the impression that he was going to be this slightly knowledgeable but very crass and like pretty racist character based on like how he was talking to Blackthorne in the beginning. But then when you meet him again, I feel like he was depicted in almost a different way. He was still very crass. That didn't change. But he was much like wiser and more cultured and more intelligent than I originally thought. Like we learned he has a Japanese wife, and he, you know, he had this discussion with Mariko where, she was horrified by the fact that one of the Portuguese sailors had called the Japanese people pigs. And he was like, yeah, that's bad, but don't you call the Koreans garlic eaters and us barbarians and all these things? So, you do the same thing. And that was a really interesting conversation. And then the way that he saved Blackthorne from his superiors was brilliant. And yeah, he just like was portrayed in a way that made me like him so much more and see him as more than just like a comedic character when we met him the second time. I don't know if you had like what your impressions on him were from when you first met him to when you met him again.
With Blackthorne.
But sorry, Rodrigues.
Yeah, sorry. I think I liked his style. By the way, I like his bantering. I mean, he's extremely rude, and he says what he thinks, and I enjoy that. I got the feeling of actually a bit of the Malasan banter. People who follow the channel knows I'm a big Malasan fan, and the straightforward dialogue with Blackthorne and so on. He doesn't, save his words for more beautiful expressions. He says what he thinks. So, and as you say, he's very smart as well. So he has this, smart probably by life experience, which is can be much more rewarding than if you just have studied, for example. So I respect that a lot. So maybe I respect Rodrigues in that way too. I think he's a very funny guy. I can see how he's made more dramatic, I suppose. Maybe I doubt he's a historical figure, but I might be wrong. I don't know. But he adds dynamic to all these characters, and it's very funny
Mhm.
when he meets them, extremely polite Japanese people in
Yeah,
the
yeah.
Queen's book, because that's such a clash and such a contrast. So
Hmm. Yeah. Who are your favorite characters?
I enjoy many of those you talked about, but I one thing I'm interested about, it's more people, but we can take Toranaga. It's their interest for the West. And I think that's
Mhm.
interesting. Of course, that has to do with political scheming and using Blackthorne as a pawn in this game, in this power struggle in Japan, where Toranaga is threatened. Also, he's really on the defense,
Right.
because he can lose his power very quickly. I think that's the
Hmm.
intention for the other rulers of Japan. Um, but I think his curiosity, his smartness to be open to other ideas and cultures,
Hmm.
to learn something. I think that's interesting. That is I don't know if that's true, but from my perspective, when I hear about Japan, sometimes literature and debate articles and so on describe Japan as an isolated society, a lot culturally, and Toranaga is in that case the opposite to that, because he's very curious on that.
Hmm.
Another guy who's curious for also scheming reasons is the Yabu Sama, which I know you got this very distinctive, dislike for him quite
Hmm.
immediately. I more pragmatic, I suppose, in the way. He's of course not a good guy, but he's
No.
quite funny. He's very funny in this book because, and that has to do, I think, a lot that he's always changing sides because he wants to support
Yes.
Ishiro or Toranaga to get political gains because he wants to trump them, I suppose,
Yeah.
for the power struggle. And since we can follow his thoughts, it becomes very hilarious and fun because his insecurity is shown all over the page. Uh,
Hmm.
so I think he's a gray. He's not so gray shaded, but he's in the middle.
Hmm.
Of those two are fighting.
Yeah. So I do find Yabu incredibly interesting as a character, but man, I do not like him, and I cannot wait for him to fall, or at least I hope he does fall.
Mm.
But he is very, very interesting, and I do like that we get his inner thoughts because I think it makes him more interesting as a, I don't know if you'd call him a villain, but as a
Yeah.
not like a character you're not rooting for. At least I'm not rooting for him. And part of why I'm not rooting for him is because he seems to relish in torture and and then because he like wanted he had one of Blackthorne's shipmates boiled alive
Mm.
and like was meditating to the guy's screams. So not like that was just a didn't like him from the start. Um but I think what's also interesting is he is this character who you can't trust him at all,
Mm.
except that he is greedy for power and wealth because he is constantly switching sides. And so, Toranaga is having to very carefully play him to get what he needs out of him, but knowing that he cannot trust Yabu and that Yabu will stab him in the back as soon as he finds a better deal. And we almost had that in
Mm.
the at the end of where we read,
Mm.
where Yabu, they were they fled Osaka with Toranaga escaping after making a deal with Yabu, and they went to the town where Blackthorne first showed up at Engine. No, I forget the name of the town.
Mm.
Um, which is part of Yabu's domain, and Yabu was insisting like
Mm.
you should come here and stay
Yeah.
with us.
Mm.
And it was almost a trap for Toranaga that could have led to him being killed by Yabu, and then Yabu turning against him and siding with Shido. But Toranaga managed to play it so that he got away from Yabu, but also forced Yabu to continue siding with him.
Yeah.
He's a very dangerous character, and he's not trustworthy, but you can play him because of his greed. So it's very interesting in that way.
And I think that last part we read is interesting because, yeah, he wanted to trap Toranaga, but was trapped himself instead, as I interpret it. And also, yeah, that's interesting scene, by the way. I think, of course, Blackthorne is a very interesting character. Maybe I thought about him like, being just a funny, unserious guy, European, unruly behavior, and so on. It seems like he has a lot of things, in his head, that is smartness as well. But he's more uncontrolled, I think, than maybe the others so far. But it's more like it's like a coming of age story of Blackthorne, not being like in fantasy, you're a small girl or boy and then you become a hero, but he's in education in Japan to behave, and in this case, in the end here, last chapter we read, to learn Japanese even if the conditions are unacceptable, or of course that the village will be killed if he hasn't learned it in 6 months. So
and I like Blackthorne as a character. I didn't say he was one of my favorites because there are aspects of him or things that he does that are really frustrating. But like makes sense for his character. Like it's very much in line with, because he's very smart, but he's also very rash and quick tempered, and he's not naive, but man, did he get duped by the Portuguese. That almost ended poorly for him when they were trying to convince him to come aboard the Portuguese ship with Toranaga, and Blackthorne was refusing, which he was smart to do. But then they were like, "Oh, we have all this food for you," and he was like, "I'm coming aboard." And then he almost got trapped and was killed. And it's like, dude, come on, think with your head, not your stomach.
He's very emotional, and
yes,
it's very emotional. Acts on feelings a lot. So it's he's a great guy to have in a TV show, I suppose, from that perspective.
Yeah, once I finish reading the book, I definitely want to watch the TV show and see how all these characters are depicted and how they're acted, and what they kept. And because I can't imagine, I don't know how many seasons it's going to be, but to do the complexities of this book in a show, like you said at the beginning, the biggest challenge is the fact that you can't hear their thoughts, and so much happens in their thoughts. Like, I even think that this book does a really good job of historical flashbacks to provide context. Like, a character will be thinking about something and it will remind them of this event that happened in history, and the author will spell it all out, and it provides a ton of context. And I like doing that in a show is more challenging. So I am kind of curious how they navigate some of that. But I don't want to watch the show until I'm done with the book, because I don't want anything actually spoiled.
Yeah, if you watch the show, please comment, of course, if you see differences and similarities too, or what your take on the show was as well in comparison to the book. I suppose because there are 2 TV shows, one in the 90s, 80s, and one now. So when I talk with friends about Shogun, they always say, "Oh, I've seen the TV show, or I've read the book too," and so on. They refer always to different books or TV shows as well, right? There is another Shogun TV or movie, I think.
Right. Yeah, I think I know what you're talking about, like an older one.
But yeah, characters in general are very entertaining. Mariko-sama is, of course, um, to have a different take. She's maybe not my. She's very interesting. Maybe not my favorite in the sense of being what do you say, entertaining character in the Shogun story. She's very serious and so on, and more of a diplomatic character. I mean, diplomatic character
Hmm.
from that perspective. But she's interesting because I think now in the later parts of the chapters we've read, she shows much more integrity. She's always had
Yeah.
high integrity, obviously, in her role as a translator to translate correctly. But now she also opposes Blackthorne or accuses him for different things that she thinks is inappropriate or not according to Japanese culture.
Hmm.
And she seems very reflective. She has a very tough situation with her husband and everything as well. So it's interesting from that point of view, I think.
Yeah, and there's a lot we still don't know about her too, because it sounds like she has a very tragic story. There was some kind of event with her father that we haven't, and like a major betrayal or something that we haven't learned yet. And then it sounds like there was also like a personal tragedy of hers, which is when she actually, like roughly when she turned to Christianity. I mean, she was made to become Christian because her like ruling daimyo, her family's ruling daimyo at the time converted to Christianity and made all of his subjects convert. But it sounds like it was a helpful thing for her at the time because it helped her go through some traumatic event. But we don't know what that is yet. So there's a lot
Mm.
about her we don't know. One question I have for you, though, is do you think by the end of the story there will be some sort of romance between Blackthorne and Mariko? Because in my mind, it seems like they're kind of setting that up, even though they're both also married. Um, we certainly know that Blackthorne is attracted to her,
Mhm, mhm.
but I don't know. I have no idea if there's romance in this story.
It, I think if I should guess, I think no. I
Mhm.
mean, from an emotional point of view, when reading, it would be yes, or very likely. Also from an entertaining value, I suppose.
Right. Mhm.
But if she's true to her integrity and loyalty,
Right.
maybe no. But yeah, I don't know. So
Mhm.
seems like a very, disciplined and loyal to core values and so on. But
Yeah.
what do you think?
I don't know. I could see it go either way. As they get to know each other more, and depending on how that goes, I like if she develops an understanding of Blackthorne, because right now she's like she has a really hard time understanding him and the actions he does, because he acts in ways that are so against their cultural norms. Um, so it probably depends on if that understanding develops. Um, I I don't know.
Mm,
I guess we'll see. Um, I don't care one way or the other. The last few chapters there just seemed like inklings of something like that happening.
mhm.
But we'll see. Um, yeah,
Yeah.
but I really like her as a character. I think she's very interesting. That the idea of identity in her, and the merger of her Christian faith and her being Japanese and a samurai, is very very interesting.
Yeah. Should we talk about? Shall we say something more about the characters or move on to favorite moments or scenes so far? And do we have
Sure.
time for that? Is my question as well, because I know we have a little bit of time today. So.
Yeah. No, I think it'd be fun to talk about a few favorite moments before
Mm,
we wrap up.
mm,
Um, I mean, we've already mentioned several of mine. So one was the discussion between Rodrigues and Mariko about essentially name calling, calling different groups barbarians or other more insulting names. I just thought that was a really interesting moment between them. It was one of like the turning points for me and Rodrigues, thinking about him as much more of a wise character than I originally thought. That moment showed a lot of wisdom on his part, but I think it was also potentially eye-opening for Mariko and made her, not in the moment, but I could see down the line starting to question certain things that are maybe normally rigid beliefs for her. So I really liked that moment. What was another? You had actually pointed this out in one of our earlier discussions. The scene with Toranaga and Blackthorne dancing was very, very amusing. Like the author definitely throws in some very entertaining moments amidst kind of a very intense story, where Blackthorne, I think, got excited about something and was like doing a dance, a Western dance, like a sailor's jig or something. And Toranaga was like, "You teach me how to do that right now." And then they just started dancing together. It was a really funny moment.
Yeah, it felt a bit like, I don't know, Tom Bombadil and Lord of the Rings scene in the middle of Shogun somehow.
Yeah.
More scenes do you have?
I think the escape from Osaka with Toranaga dressing and pretending to be a woman in one of the carrying carts. And then to avoid him getting discovered, Blackthorne acting like a madman, and them having to like play all of that out, and how, because Blackthorne is a barbarian, he has these spells of madness and they can't punish him for that. Like that whole sequence of events was amazing, because it was such a crazy tense, like suspenseful moment, because you're like, is Toranaga, are they going to escape? But it was sprinkled in with these bits of just hilarity with the antics that they had to do to get out there. I really liked that sequence.
Yeah, there are many moments, I think. I thought about two things. There are many scenes. You mentioned a few, which I enjoyed too. And also the reflections, I think, of Blackthorne and Mariko-sama, when they, it concerns all Rodrigues too, when they think about the way how they view Japan and where they come from, or Mariko-sama viewing the other. Viewing the other is an interesting aspect, I think, always in this book, but it's not just one scene, it's recurring. But there is one scene that I really found interesting, and that is when they have to save Rodrigues because he falls overboard, and this is in chapter 8.
Right.
And that is interesting because I think the cooperation between because they are I think they are on a cliff and have to go down to save him. They don't know if he's alive or not. Probably not, I think, in the beginning. But the cooperation there between Blackthorne and Yabu, because then Blackthorne's knowledge of Japanese is even less than it is now, where we are in the book. Now I don't know how good it is, but he understands, everyday speech and maybe polite words, it seems like. And also that the Yabu's men are extremely loyal to him as well. So I think there is one is showing his loyalty by jumping off the cliff, getting Yabu's attention. So there's so much in that scene that is interesting, and the perspective why Yabu is interested to have a good relationship with Blackthorne, but also with Rodrigues. I think there is so much in that scene that is representing maybe Yabu mostly, I think.
Yeah. Yeah, that scene was really interesting and well done. Um, and yeah, because there are definitely times where Yabu shines as like doing something good or something noble or whatever. So he is very much a Shades of Grey character, but I have a hard time overlooking some of the
Yeah,
other things
I
he
don't
does.
want to win you over to,
Yeah. Yeah.
but it's funny. It's funny how you can interpret. He's of course the things you mentioned with torture is of course
Yeah.
unacceptable. So it's nothing like that, as you can imagine if you follow my channel and my talks. So I'm quite a peaceful guy, but as a character in the stories is interesting. Another thing
Mhm.
that I found very interesting is I've been on it earlier in this talk, but there is some certain scenes, especially in the beginning of the book, where Blackthorne meets Toranaga with the translator. I think the first
Mhm.
translator is Alvito,
Yeah.
and then it's Mariko Sama later. But these talks are interesting because of the curiosity of Toranaga and also the tension that we don't know why Toranaga is asking, and also the confusion from Blackthorne, who makes up a lot of what he's telling, why they are there, and the European history is somewhat what distorted, and to benefit, his gain being against the Portuguese or the Catholics. So.
Mhm.
So it's
Yeah.
I think that one I like a lot and go back to from time to time when before we have talks, preparatory talks before this, of course, and we just read the chapters and meet up and chat. So that's very nice.
Right.
So
Yeah. Another scene that I think I really liked was the scene where Toranaga and his samurai were learning how to dive.
mhm,
I guess the way that Blackthorne dove. There was a moment on the ship where like it was kind of the calm between two storms, where Blackthorne dove off the ship after having slept for like 24 hours as a way to just refresh himself, and all the samurai were like, or Toranaga was like, show me how to do that, teach me how to do that. And Blackthorne tried to say, oh, like, I'm happy to teach you, it's going to take time. And Toranaga's like, no, 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 I'm going to learn right now.
mm,
um and just the description of them learning that and trying, and how Toranaga kept failing a bunch of times and his like belly was bright red from all the belly flops he kept doing. And
mm,
then Mariko was also got in on that and learned how to do it. And it was just it was a really nice scene of calm and play. It wasn't like, there were aspects of it that were funny, of course, but I don't
mm,
think that was the main intention of the scene, to be funny. Like, it wasn't a comedic pause. It was like I don't know, like a nice breath
yeah,
between moments of incredible tension. And
mm,
those kind of moments I think are really nice because you get to see different sides of the characters. It's not just about how cunning and how witty and how cutthroat or whatever they are. They
mm,
have these other sides to them, and I just really liked that moment.
mm. Yeah, there are parts of that in the book spread out where there is more of a mindful attitude to
Hmm.
I think, as you say, a breather. It's also when, of course, they drink tea and eat food,
Yep.
or just sit out in the rain, and so on, the nature itself. So I think that's nice. So that's a good place to bring a cup of tea or just relaxing
Yep.
for yourself. So it's happening a lot in this book, so it's good
Hmm.
with the breathers, I think.
Yeah.
Have we forgot something we want to touch upon at the moment?
I don't think so. I think that's we talked about kind of our main themes, and yeah, I mean, there's many other scenes that I know both of us really liked, but um, yeah, too much to talk about in one one discussion.
Yeah, yeah. And with that said, we're going to continue read, of course, Shogun, and
Hmm.
continue to have our talks that we usually don't record. But if you are interested or are watching, and you think we are, to make some recording when we have finished the book or have come further. I think that would be interesting for us to talk about that, and maybe for you to listen to as well. And the talks here will continue on the channel. So I'm going to record a talk on Sunday with a contemplative reader, Jay Den, about the Book of the New Sun, different genre, but also very philosophical and on identity and spirituality, maybe less entertaining than Shogun, in a way at least. It's more in depth, I think, language-wise and so on. But there are a different kind of book. We're going to record on Sunday, so there will be a release on that video next week. So I'm thanking you, Rick, for being on the channel. Always very, very fun to have you here.
Yeah, thank you so much. This was great, and I really, really have been enjoying reading this book and discussing it with you off camera, and looking forward to continuing. I actually need to get mine is only so some versions of this they printed in 2 parts. Mine's only part 1, and we've got like 30 pages or so left in part 1. So I need to actually get the second part. But yeah, it's been super great. Thank you so much for the opportunity and for bringing me on.
Yeah, likewise. Thank you. And if you like the video, of course, like, subscribe, share, and so on, all that kind of things. But more important is to comment if you want to do that, of course, or to connect, because that's the point of the channel, to connect with like-minded people. So until next time, have a great day and enjoy your Friday.